It's Thursday, and welcome. You've joined us for the 11th episode of Echoes from the Source.
Great to be diving in again.
Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating deep dive, I think. It's into a concept that, well, once you grasp it, it can fundamentally shift how you experience the world and your relationships, too.
Absolutely.
We'll be exploring ideas from Gurudev's book, An Intimate Note to the Sincere Seeker, specifically focusing on a chapter that delves into the nature of fault-finding.
Yeah, and what's so compelling about this chapter, really, is how it tackles a very, very common human tendency, seeing what's wrong, often way before we see what's right.
Mm-hmm.
It offers such a powerful framework for understanding why we do this, and maybe more importantly, how we can start to cultivate a different way of seeing.
Exactly. And, this isn't about just ignoring problems or like being Pollyannish about everything. Not at all.
No, it's deeper than that.
It's about something much more profound, really understanding the lens through which we perceive reality. So the chapter introduces these two key terms, Anasuyā and Anasuyā.
Anasuyā and Anasuyā.
Yeah. Our mission today is basically to unpack these concepts, see how they actually play out in our daily lives. We'll look at some examples, explore the impact these mindsets have.
And ultimately figure out how cultivating Anasuyā can lead to, well, greater clarity and connection.
Right. So let's unpack this. What exactly is Anasuyā? Where do we start?
Okay, so Anasuyā, as the chapter describes it, it's essentially a mindset that habitually finds faults and tends to see malicious intent almost everywhere.
Like a default setting.
Kind of, yeah. It's a lens of suspicion, of criticism, that really colors our interactions and our whole understanding of the world around us. The core insight, I think, is that Anasuyā basically projects our own internal negativity out there.
Onto the world.
Onto the world, yeah. And that creates this sort of self-reinforcing cycle of dissatisfaction, disconnection. The text gives some really vivid examples.
Like the door one.
Exactly. Imagine a windy day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone shuts a door just as you're walking up. Maybe the wind catches it. Right. And the person about to enter immediately feels it was slammed right in their face. That's Anasuyā at play, attributing negative intent where, maybe none existed at all.
It makes me think of, like, maybe that friend, you have a long, really positive friendship, years maybe, and then one thing happens, one perceived slight, maybe tiny, and they focus just on that, decide to end the whole relationship, and suddenly it seems like they can't see any of the good that was ever there.
That's a perfect example. So like you
Yeah.
said, with that relationship breakdown, Anasuyā isn't just noticing flaws, it's letting those perceived flaws completely wipe out everything positive.
Yeah, totally overshadow it.
And the book points out this can even happen on a spiritual path. Someone steps away, maybe has a disagreement,
Right.
and suddenly they believe everything about the path was wrong right from the very beginning. It's a fundamental shift in how they see things, all driven by this fault-finding tendency taking over.
Wow. It really twists perception.
And it's not just limited to, interactions with others or paths we choose.
Yeah.
The chapter uses that really poignant example of a child saying, "Mother, you don't love me."
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It is. The child's perception is just skewed, unable to recognize the mother's inherent love. And building on that idea of distorted perception, the text even mentions someone saying directly to Gurudev, "You don't love me."
To the master himself.
Yes. These instances just highlight how Anasuyā can distort even the most fundamental bonds, the clearest expressions of care. But what's interesting there is that Gurudev, the master in the example, he doesn't get frustrated or angry. He shows a completely different way of responding to that kind of fault finding.
Which points towards the alternative, I guess. So if Anasuyā is this habit of seeing faults everywhere, what then is Anasuyā?
Right, the flip side.
The chapter introduces it as a different level of consciousness, doesn't it? A state of being, quote, devoid of fault-finding eyes.
Exactly. Devoid of fault-finding eyes. And there's that key moment where Krishna tells Arjuna he's sharing the royal secret, the deepest knowledge.
Yeah.
Because Arjuna is Anasuyā, meaning Arjuna isn't finding fault even in someone as close, as intimate as Krishna himself.
Okay, that's huge. Not finding fault even up close.
This is such a crucial point. The text really emphasizes that it's easier to miss faults from a distance, isn't it?
Sure, things look smoother from far away.
Exactly. But up close, imperfections become obvious, like craters on the moon, totally invisible from Earth, but right there when you get closer.
Or even like a tabletop that looks smooth.
Right. Until you look really closely, then you see the little scratches, the grain, the tiny flaws. And if our focus is only on those holes, those imperfections,
We miss the whole table.
we miss the bigger picture, the magnitude of things, as the book says. And the key insight here, I think, is that Shifting our internal gaze lets us perceive the inherent goodness, the interconnectedness that often gets obscured by that fault-finding habit.
So Anasuyā allows that perception.
Yes, the chapter's really clear. Without Anasuyā, true knowledge, that deeper understanding, it just cannot blossom within us. It's like having cataracts.
Ah, the cataract analogy.
Yeah. No amount of cleaning the external mirror of the world, other people, is going to help until the internal vision is clear, until the cataract is dealt with.
That is such a powerful analogy because it highlights that the issue so often lies within us, not out there. The chapter explains that Anasuyā gives us this idea that the whole world is flawed.
Everyone else is the problem.
Right. But Anasuyā is that dawning realization that, hang on, maybe it's my own vision that's blurred. And here's where it gets really interesting for me. The moment we recognize, okay, maybe my vision is wrong here.
Just that recognition.
The text suggests half the problem is already solved, just acknowledging the possibility.
It's a huge step. And the sources we have, they really delve deeper into the impact of Anasuyā. They describe it almost like a silent illness. Yeah, a toxic mindset that doesn't just disturb relationships, though it definitely does that, but it also blocks our spiritual growth. It kind of shuts the door to grace, to receiving anything positive. It's portrayed as this heavy weight we carry around, like wearing those foggy glasses we mentioned and wondering why the world seems so off, without realizing the fog is actually inside.
That internal dialogue it fuels is so relatable. You hear it, don't you? They should have treated me better. Why wasn't I invited to that? Nobody really cares about me.
Exactly. Those constant whispers.
They just poison the heart, disconnect us from joy, from love. And the text suggests that without the eyes of love, which sounds like Anasuyā, even grace, even positive things happening, and they feel distant, like we can't receive them properly.
That makes perfect sense. So the path to Anasuyā, then, it's really about choosing clarity. It's definitely not about being naive or, pretending everything's perfect when it isn't.
No, it's not denial.
Not denial at all. Instead, it's about knowing that our perception, our first take on things, might not be the full truth until it's seen with, well, compassion, understanding.
Okay.
There's that story of the volunteer in the ashram, which illustrates this so beautifully. Remember that one?
Vaguely refresh my memory.
So she was working there initially with a really full heart, lots of enthusiasm, but then this thought creeps in. I'm being taken for granted.
Ah, okay. The seed of resentment.
Precisely. And from that one thought, resentment grew. And suddenly she started finding fault in everything around the ashram, everyone involved. It all seemed wrong.
Right. The Anasuyā lens took over.
Totally. It was only later, after hearing Gurudev speak gently about how these little ego wounds can color our entire world, that she had this realization, oh my gosh, I've been seeing everything through Anasuyā. And just realizing it brought this huge sense of release.
Just seeing it for what it was.
Yeah.
So, okay, how can we, as the learner listening, how can we actively cultivate this Anasuyā mindset in our own lives? It sounds great, but what are the practical steps?
Good question. The sources offer several quite practical things. One is just regularly engaging in a kind of self-check. Asking yourself, especially when you feel critical, is this actually a truth or is this just my judgment talking?
So pausing before reacting.
Yes. Before reacting, take that breath. Pause. Is it fact or am I feeling about the fact? Another related one is consciously practicing giving the benefit of the doubt.
Especially with people close to us, maybe.
Exactly. Especially with those closest to us where hurts can feel deeper. And just noticing how often we might jump to conclusions, misinterpret intentions. It happens all the time.
It really does. We project so much.
We do. And another very active practice, deliberately speaking praise more often. This can actually help rewire our brain away from its default criticism mode.
Interesting. So where the mind wants to criticize.
Make a conscious effort to find something, anything, to appreciate instead. It shifts the focus. Additionally, the texts really highlight the importance of satsang, being in the company of truth, positive influences.
Good company, yeah.
Good company, good energy, and silence. Practices like meditation, quiet reflection. These are ways to cleanse that inner lens, reset the heart, get perspective.
Okay.
And it's important to remember, becoming Anasuyā isn't about suddenly being blind to mistakes, others or our own.
Right. It's not about ignoring reality.
Not at all. It's about choosing not to be obsessed with them. Choosing not to let every little flaw constantly disturb our own inner peace. Recognizing that our peace is actually too precious for that.
That's a key point, protecting our own peace. And that metaphor, the dusty mirror versus the cataract, it keeps coming up across the sources, doesn't it?
It does, repeatedly.
To really emphasize that the problem, more often than not, lies in our perception, our vision, rather than the external world itself.
Exactly. We keep trying to fix the mirror, change other people, change situations, polish the external world,
Trying to wipe the dust off the mirror.
without addressing the cataract in our own vision. The journey from Anasuyā to Anasuyā is described very clearly as a transformation within ourselves, fundamentally. It's not about getting others to change first.
It's an internal shift.
It has to be.
Yeah.
The sources also really emphasize the importance of just pausing before judgment, trying to see through the eyes of love, or at least understanding, actively working to clean our inner lens through practices like meditation, reflection, self-inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that other story, the devotee who felt completely ignored by her master, just felt unseen, unloved.
Yes, similar to the child example earlier.
Very similar. And she suffered with this feeling for a long time until she finally realized through deeper practice that it was her own mind, her own Anasuyā, creating that feeling of distance and separation. The master hadn't changed at all.
Wow. That's a powerful reminder that our perceptions can truly be our biggest obstacle sometimes.
They really can.
So ultimately, this whole deep dive into Asuyā and Anasuyā, it really reveals that we have a choice, don't we? A fundamental choice in how we see the world.
We absolutely do.
We can choose to focus on the flaws, the imperfections, the slights, which, as the texts show, inevitably leads to a sense of separation, dissatisfaction, negativity. Or we can choose to consciously cultivate a different vision, a vision of grace, understanding, maybe seeing the bigger picture. And again, this isn't about denying reality.
Not at all.
But about choosing to see with a deeper, more compassionate, more Anasuyā perspective.
Beautifully put. And what's just fascinating here is how this concept from ancient wisdom offers such practical, relevant guidance for navigating the complexities of modern life today.
Totally relevant.
From our closest relationships, family, partners, friends, right through to our broader understanding of the world around us, politics, society. This really raises an important question for you, the learner, listening now. Considering all this, where in your own life might the lens of Anasuyā be subtly, maybe unknowingly, coloring your perceptions?
That's the self-reflection part. So what does this all mean for you? Really, it's an invitation. An invitation to become more aware, more conscious of your own habitual thought patterns.
Just noticing them is key.
Exactly. And to genuinely consider the possibility that what you often see as fault out there might be, at least in part, a reflection of your own inner state, your own cataract. The power, the real shift, lies in recognizing this and then consciously choosing to cultivate the clarity of Anasuyā.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, becoming an Anasuyā, it isn't just about achieving some personal peace, although that's huge.
Right, that's a great benefit.
It absolutely is. But it's also about fostering deeper connections with others, genuine understanding between people, and even, as the texts strongly suggest, profound spiritual growth.
Yeah.
Remember Krishna's trust in Arjuna. It was tied to Arjuna being Anasuyā.
That's a really important connection. So maybe consider this. The next time you find yourself really focusing, maybe obsessing a little on someone's imperfections or feeling intensely critical about a situation, just take that conscious moment to pause. Before you react, before you speak, just pause. And ask yourself honestly, am I seeing this clearly? Am I seeing the whole picture? Or is there perhaps another way, a more compassionate, more understanding way to look at this?
That simple pause and question.
It can be the very first step, that tiny crack of light towards clearing your inner lens.
Wonderfully said. And maybe finally, just a thought for you to carry forward from all this. The chapter suggests that when you truly purify your vision, when you cultivate Anasuyā, the whole world starts to appear divine.
Wow.
So perhaps the most profound journey isn't really about striving to find or create a flawless world out there. Maybe it's more about diligently, patiently cultivating a flawless way of seeing.
A shift in perception changes everything.
We all know that feeling, right? Someone lets you down, the situation doesn't quite pan out, and boom, your mind just latches on to what went wrong.
Yeah, who messed up?
Exactly.
Right.
And that's pretty much the core of this idea, Anasuyā, this tendency to always be looking for the fault in things.
And it's funny, well, not funny, haha, but interesting how our world almost seems to, encourage it.
Oh, totally. Online comments, news cycles. It's like we're trained to critique, to find the flaw.
You get points for being critical, almost.
Right. But here's the thing. Have you ever stopped to think maybe that constant focus on what's wrong, maybe it's causing us more pain than whatever actually happened.
That's a good point.
Like, have you ever been really, really mad at someone just because they weren't, perfect? Or maybe you got some advice from a mentor, honest advice, but it stung and you resented it.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Well, those are little moments, little glimpses of Anasuyā doing its thing, kind of obscure as the good stuff.
So the big question becomes, what are we actually missing when we're so busy pointing fingers or finding fault?
Exactly. Because in that frustration, we can totally miss the bigger picture. Maybe the person had good intentions, or maybe there's a lesson in there we're just not seeing because we're annoyed. And that's where this other concept, Anasuyā, comes into play. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna actually praises Arjuna for being Anasuyā.
Meaning he wasn't a fault finder.
Right. He was open, not suspicious. And Krishna says that's why he could receive the deeper teachings. It made him receptive.
That's really powerful, isn't it? It wasn't about Arjuna being some perfect saint.
Not at all.
It was his openness, his lack of that cynical edge. It implies our critical mind can actually be a barrier to learning.
Yeah, Gurudev put it really well. He said something like, to be Anasuyā is to see beyond the surface, accept people and things as they are, without letting the imperfections cloud your judgment.
Acceptance.
So, okay, what is this fault-finding thing, really? How does it work?
And crucially, how do we shift?
Yes.
Yeah.
How can we, actually cultivate more of that clear, compassionate way of seeing that Anasuyā state in our own lives? We've looked at some sources that offer some really practical ways to change that perspective.
And what's really striking in these sources is just how subtly Anasuyā operates. It's not just noticing a mistake.
No.
It's how that noticing sort of takes over. It twists how we see everything else. The main point is Anasuyā gives us these negative tinted glasses.
Totally. It warps things. Like you see a beautiful painting, but there's one tiny chip in the frame.
And that's all you can see.
Exactly. You miss the whole masterpiece because you're fixated on that little flaw. And it's so easy to fall into that. Someone's late.
Instantly. They don't care about my time.
Right. Zero consideration for traffic or an emergency or anything else. Or someone tries to help, offers a suggestion.
Yeah. And you hear, they think I'm stupid, even if they were genuinely trying to be helpful.
Yeah. It's like we default to the negative interpretation.
And thinking about life more broadly, Anasuyā really stops us from appreciating, well, the richness of it all. We get so hung up on the little imperfections that we just don't see the love, the kindness, the chances to learn and grow that are right there. The key thing is our fault-finding literally blinds us to the good.
It reminds me of that image, a child being held, maybe even hugged tightly, told they're loved, but they're still crying, you don't love me.
Wow. Yeah.
That's Anasuyā, isn't it? Even when goodness is right there, slapping you in the face almost, that fault-finding habit stops you from actually taking it in.
Which brings up trust, doesn't it? Anasuyā just eats away at trust.
Definitely.
It makes you suspicious. A kind gesture seems manipulative. Good advice feels like an attack. It just casts this shadow of doubt over everything. The insight there is that fault-finding breeds cynicism.
And it's so harmful, not just to our relationships. I mean, obviously it hurts those.
Yeah, big time.
But it hurts us inside. It messes with our own peace. It makes our hearts kind of shrink. And it pushes away that feeling of grace, of gratitude. It's like having this internal critic just constantly scanning for what's wrong.
And the illusion of it all is fascinating. We think the problem is out there.
Right. It's their fault or the situation's fault.
But the sources really suggest often the root issue is our own perception, our own kind of clouded view. One source said it nicely. It's not always that the window's dirty. Sometimes our vision is just off. The real takeaway is that our perception literally creates our reality.
Exactly. It's not the world that needs fixing half the time. It's how we're looking at it. And this blurry vision, it has real consequences.
Oh, yeah.
We might doubt someone who genuinely cares about us.
Yeah.
I might end a good relationship because of some minor annoyance. We might even dismiss really useful teachings just because they, rub us the wrong way initially.
And thinking about connection, human connection, Anasuyā is like a wall builder.
Yeah.
Every fault you focus on, every judgment you make, it's like adding another brick to the wall between you and others, or even between you and an experience. The core idea is judgment divides.
Which is the exact opposite of what we actually want, isn't it? We crave connection, belonging.
Deep down, yes.
And the sources really hammer this home. Non-judgment, that Anasuyā state, is what fosters unity. It starts taking down those walls.
It also ties into control, interestingly. The sources hint that Anasuyā often pops up when things don't go according to our plan.
Ah, okay, like unmet expectations.
Exactly. Reality isn't matching our blueprint, so we start picking it apart, finding flaws. The insight being that fault finding is often just a reaction because we didn't get our way.
It's like we're trying to mentally force everything into the shape we want, and when it doesn't fit, we get critical.
Ugh.
Like trying to see a beautiful garden, but the window's covered in dust.
Mm.
All you see is the dust, right? You miss the flowers, the colors, everything. That dust is Anasuyā clouding our view.
And the ultimate impact, really, as these sources point out, is that Anasuyā constricts our hearts. It disconnects us from love, from understanding, from truth. The essential point is, fault-finding cuts us off from what matters most.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty clear picture of Anasuyā, the fault-finding habit, and how damaging it can be. Let's flip it now. Let's talk about Anasuyā, the antidote. What does that actually look like?
Well, fundamentally, Anasuyā is simply the lack of that fault-finding habit. It's the ability to see past the surface stuff, the imperfections.
And see the value underneath, the truth.
Exactly. To recognize the inherent worth in people and situations, even when they aren't flawless. The key idea is Anasuyā is about seeing the good despite the flaws, or even through the flaws sometimes.
So it's not like you become naive or ignore problems.
Not at all.
It's more about choosing not to let those problems define the whole picture.
Precisely. The sources frame Anasuyā as the path away from judgment's prison, really. It opens you up to life's hidden beauty, the nuances. And, importantly, it's presented as essential for accessing deeper knowledge or wisdom. The core insight, non-judgment, unlocks understanding.
Which loops back to Krishna and Arjuna, right?
Exactly. Why him? Not because he was perfect, but because he had that openness, that lack of suspicion towards his guide. The sources keep hitting this note. Real learning thrives where there's humility, receptivity, where that constant critical filter is turned down. And the sources offer a really cool take on perfection itself. They suggest perfection isn't about having zero flaws. It's more about including and accepting the flaws. Think about art you love, or maybe an old piece of furniture.
Yeah.
It might have scratches, imperfections, but those are part of its story, its character. They don't necessarily detract. Sometimes they add value. The takeaway is that real beauty often embraces imperfection.
That makes sense. So when we stop laser focusing on what's wrong,
We start seeing what's possible. What else is there? It just shifts everything.
and relating back to that control thing we talked about,
And Anasuyā frees us from that. If you're not constantly scanning for errors to fix, you can actually relax a bit more. You can kind of flow with life as it happens. The core idea is that non-judgment allows acceptance of what is.
one source used the phrase seeing with the heart, not just the eyes. What does that really mean in this context?
I think it means moving beyond just cataloging surface flaws. It's about tapping into a deeper perception, understanding the essence, the intention, the interconnectedness. Our eyes might see the mistake.
But the heart understands the person behind it.
Yeah.
Or the bigger context.
Yes, exactly. The heart sees the shared humanity, the effort, the context. The key takeaway is that Anasuyā is a deeper, more compassionate kind of seeing.
So it's about getting the whole picture, seeing it with balance, with compassion, acknowledging that humans are flawed. Even sacred things have rough edges sometimes.
Perfectly put. And the contrast is stark. Anasuyā shrinks the heart, makes us feel tight and critical. Anasuyā, on the other hand, invites grace, wonder, a feeling of expansion. The core insight, non-judgment, opens us up to positive emotions.
Okay, this is incredibly insightful, but let's get practical. This is the big question. How do we do this? How do we actually move from that default Anasuyā setting to this more open Anasuyā perspective, especially when fault-finding feels so automatic sometimes?
It is automatic for many of us, but the sources offer concrete practices. A huge one is consciously practicing acceptance.
Acceptance of.
Of others, of ourselves, of situations, just reminding yourself maybe daily that everyone is learning, growing. We only see a tiny part of their story, or our own story even. The first step towards Anasuyā is really acceptance.
So instead of jumping to judgment, choose curiosity. Is that fair?
That's a great way to put it. When that judgmental thought pops up, and it will, the advice is to pause. Just take a breath and ask, okay, wait, what am I missing here? What's the other side of this? Approaching things with curiosity instead of condemnation changes the whole energy. The practice is choose inquiry over accusation.
And definitely letting go of those crazy high expectations we put on people and ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. That's massive.
Yeah.
Embracing imperfections, seeing it not as a failure, but just as part of being human is key. And self-reflection helps too.
How so?
Well, when you honestly look at your own flaws, your own struggles, it makes it a lot easier to be understanding and compassionate when you see flaws in others. It builds empathy. The practice is know your own imperfections.
And there were some really specific daily things mentioned too, right? Like if someone disappoints you.
Yeah, instead of fuming, ask yourself, wonder what they might be going through. Or when you mess up, instead of beating yourself up, try thinking, okay, learning moment, growing pains.
I like that.
Even just a quiet, it's okay to yourself when things aren't perfect can start to rewire that inner critic. And always trying to zoom out, what's the bigger picture here? The core practice involves cultivating empathy and self-compassion daily.
What about when we feel judged or misunderstood? That's a tough one.
It really is. The suggestion there is, again, pause. Ask yourself, am I seeing this situation clearly right now, or am I reacting based on old wounds, past hurts?
Checking our own filters.
Exactly. And maybe affirming something positive, like, okay, fear is telling me X, but there's probably more love or goodwill here than my fear lets me see. And forgiveness. Letting go quickly. Holding on to resentment just poisons us, right? Let it go, make space for grace. The core practice is challenging our negative takes and forgiving quickly.
Mindfulness seems woven through all of this too.
Definitely. That pause before reacting. Stepping back mentally. What's the bigger story? What am I not seeing? And checking in with yourself regularly. Okay, I'm feeling judgmental right now. Why? Is this actually helping me or anyone else?
So it's a constant process, really.
It is. It's about empathy. Trying to step into someone else's shoes. It's about focusing on the whole narrative, not just the typo. It's about letting go of needing everything to be perfect. And consciously, when that fault-finding thought comes up, acknowledge it. Maybe say, there's Anasuyā again, and then gently let it go. Bring your focus back to the present, to the bigger picture. The core practice is just consistent self-awareness and consciously choosing a different thought.
Okay, so if we commit to these practices, if we start shifting towards Anasuyā, what's the payoff? What really changes?
Well, the sources are pretty clear. Anasuyā doesn't mean you suddenly can't see flaws. You're not blind.
Right.
But you see them in proportion. They don't dominate your view. The real freedom is in that non-judgment. You waste less energy obsessing over what's wrong.
But you have more energy to appreciate what's right.
Exactly. That's the key transformation, moving from a default of negativity to one of appreciation.
And you start seeing possibilities, potential, instead of just problems and limitations.
Precisely. And life feels easier somehow. You can navigate things with more grace because you're not fighting reality constantly, trying to force it into your perfect mold. You embrace the flow more. The sources talk about it like cleaning your inner vision, like getting cataracts removed from your soul's eye. The key transformation is more inner peace and acceptance.
And that's a powerful image.
Yeah.
So seeing clearly isn't pretending the cracks aren't there.
No.
It's just choosing to focus on the light shining through them.
Beautifully said. That one choice where you place your focus changes everything. The sources basically argue that maybe the world doesn't need fixing nearly as much as our perception of it does. Clean your own glass, and suddenly the world looks brighter, kinder. And that state, Anasuyā, it just invites grace. It allows wisdom to actually land and take root. The key transformation is seeing reality more positively and insightfully.
And it creates more peace inside, more harmony. It stops the internal arguments, the division, and fosters that sense of connection, of oneness. The essence really seems to be about seeing the divine spark or just the basic goodness in everything and everyone. Appreciating imperfection is just part of the deal.
Absolutely. And the final outcome, deeper connections with people, more resilience when things get tough, and access to a much deeper kind of wisdom. The key transformation is better relationships, resilience, and wisdom.
Wow. Okay, so summing it all up then, this default setting, this Anasuyā, this fault-finding habit, it really does cloud things up, creates a lot of suffering we don't need.
It really does.
But the other way, Anasuyā, consciously practicing non-judgment, that leads to clarity, peace, and just a much richer understanding of life.
It highlights how much power our internal viewpoint holds over our experience of the world.
So for you listening, we really hope you'll take a moment to think about this. Where does fault-finding show up for you? Just notice it, without judgment, ironically.
Yep.
And maybe experiment a little. Try one or two of those practices we talked about for cultivating an Anasuyā. See what happens.
And here's something to really chew on. Think about one important relationship or maybe one area of your life that feels challenging. What might happen if you consciously tried to shift your focus away from the flaws, just for a while, and looked for the bigger picture, the underlying good?
What new beauty, what hidden potential might you uncover if you just adjusted your lens a little bit?
It's a powerful question.
Definitely food for thought. And if you want to go deeper, the Bhagavad Gita itself and the teachings of Gurudev are fantastic resources on these ideas. It's really all about tapping into that incredible power of seeing clearly and seeing with compassion.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today.
Thank you.
We sincerely hope this exploration of Anasuyā and Anasuyā from Gurudev's teachings has offered you some, well, truly valuable insights, something useful. We really encourage you to take some time, maybe just sit with these ideas, reflect on them, and see how they might resonate and apply within the unique context of your own life.
See where it fits for you.
Exactly. Until our next exploration together, keep diving deeper.